and ancient prophecy reveals the future. The story begins with the tragic deportation of thousands of Jews from their homeland in Palestine. Among the captives whom King Nebuchadnezzar took to Babylon were 4 young princes: Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. In a move that seems strange to us but that was common in those days, Nebuchadnezzar enrolled these 4 young men in the University of Babylon to be trained as royal advisors. Sometime after this the king had a dream, but that couldn't remember the next morning. Convinced of the dream's importance, Nebuchadnezzar called in his royal advisor and asked to tell him both what he had dreamed and what his dream meant. These wise men protested the preposterous demand, but the king said, "Either tell me the dream or I'll have you execute." Despite the death threat, however, the royal advisors couldn't come up with a credible answer. Now Daniel and his 3 friends hadn't been called to the palace with the rest of the king council. However, perhaps because they were wise men in training, the decree included them. When the officers came to arrest them, Daniel asked for a bit more time. The request was granted, and that night God gave Daniel the very same dream Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed. God had been the one who had given it to the king in the first place. The next morning the arresting officer brought Daniel before the king. In the book of Daniel chapter 2, verse 27 and 28, 27 Daniel answered in the presence of the king, and said, "The secret which the king has demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show to the king." 28 But there is a God in heaven that reveals secrets, and makes known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. You dream, and the visions of your head on your bed are these. Daniel told the king what he had dreamed. You looked, O king, and there before you stood a large statue. The head of the statue was made of gold. Its arm and chest were of silver, its waist of brass, its legs of iron, and the image's feet were made of iron and clay mixed. And dream proceeded. A huge stone came out of nowhere, knocked the image down, and ground it to powder. The stone then became a great mountain that filled the whole earth. Naturally, the king was anxious to know what the dream meant. The beginning of Daniel's explanation must have filled him with pride. You, O king, are that head of gold. But his next words weren't so flattering. After you another kingdom will rise, inferior to yours. Daniel explained that altogether, 3 kingdoms would follow Babylon. Most of the Bible interpreters agree that they represent Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. But Rome was the last in the succession of powerful empires. When it broke up, its remnants eventually became the various nations of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East that we know today. The stone destruction of the image represents the destruction of these nations at the end of the world, after which God will establish his own eternal kingdom. Now here's what's so astonishing about this prophecy. Daniel wrote it sometime around the year 600 BC. He was acquainted with Babylon since he lived there, and he may have known of Medo-Persia at the time he wrote his prophecy, although that power didn't overthrow Babylon until years later. But humanly speaking, there's no way Daniel could have predicted the rise and fall of Greece and Rome, or the breakup of the Rome Empire. Yet every high school textbook on world history testifies that Nebuchadnezzar's dream was fulfilled exactly as Daniel gave it to the king. Some Bible commentators claim that Daniel wrote only about 150 years before Christ rather than in about 600 BC, as he claimed. So they say, there was nothing supernatural about his outline of history. But even if Daniel had written his prophecies in 150 BC, there is no way he could have known about the breakup of the Roman Empire into many divisions, which occurred some 400 years later. So an amazing fact confronts us. A prophet who lived more than 2,500 years ago peered down the stream of time and gave a presciently accurate outline of the future. We can draw no other conclusion from this than Daniel received this outline of the future from God himself. And because everything else in Daniel's portrayal of world history has been fulfilled, we can be sure that the last event, the end of the world as we know it, and the establishment of God's own kingdom will also happen.